The sea was alive with color and light. In the warm shallows of the Miocene epoch, sunlight pierced the water's surface, scattering into 1,000 golden shafts that danced through drifting clouds of plankton. Schools of silvery fish darted and turned in unison, shimmering like liquid mirrors. Above, seabirds sliced across the waves, their cries muffled to low vibrations underwater. Below, the seafloor spread out in a patchwork of seagrass meadows and coral outcrops, a sanctuary for countless creatures. In the heart of this marine nursery, a shadow stirred. A newborn shark, already longer than a grown human, flexed for the first time in the open ocean. It was a Megalodon pup, though it had no name for itself, no concept of its destiny. Instinct was its only guide. Its tail swept from side to side in smooth, deliberate arcs, sending ripples through the water. Cold oxygen-rich seawater surged through its gills, feeding its blood with life. Every pulse of water carried information, the direction of currents, the vibration of distant fins, the faint chemical trails left by other creatures. The young predator's senses were raw yet razor-sharp. It could feel the low hum of motion all around, the tiny heartbeats of fish hidden in the grass, the slow shuffle of a turtle grazing on algae, the flicker of movement at the edge of visibility. The ocean was vast, but every pulse, every taste in the water, told a story. Hunger came quickly. The pup's dark eyes caught the flicker of anchovies ahead, moving like a single living cloud. The mass of fish glittered in the sunlight, every turn flashing silver and blue. The Megalodon reacted without thought, muscles coiling, tail lashing, and lunged forward. But the anchovies split apart in perfect coordination, a living curtain that opened just before its jaws could close. The shark's teeth snapped on empty water, leaving only a mouthful of bubbles. It circled back, learning this was its first lesson. Speed and size were not enough. Timing was everything. The nursery waters were a rare refuge in an unforgiving world. The shallows broke the ocean's power into gentle swells, and the abundance of life offered both protection and opportunity. Here, young sharks could grow before venturing into deeper, more dangerous waters. But this sanctuary was not free from threats. A shadow larger than the Megalodon passed by, a sea turtle older than storms, its shell etched with decades of survival. The pup followed, driven by curiosity and hunger, and snapped at the hard curve of its shell. Its teeth scraped harmlessly against armor, and the turtle twisted away with a powerful sweep of its flippers, vanishing into deeper water. Another lesson. Some prey could not be taken so easily. The seafloor here sloped gently toward a drop-off, where light faded into a blue-green abyss. The Megalodon felt the pull of that deep, a cold, mysterious gravity, drawing it away from the safety of the nursery. From below, a faint metallic taint drifted upward through the water. Blood. It was the scent of opportunity, but also of danger. The young shark descended cautiously, toward the shelf's edge. Shapes emerged from the haze, two titans locked in a slow, violent spiral. One was a massive striped shark, larger and older than the pup by decades, its flanks scarred from countless battles. The other was no shark at all, but a colossal whale with a block-shaped head, and a mouth armed with cone-shaped teeth the size of a man's fist. Livyatan, the apex predator of the Miocene seas. They circled and struck, each blow shaking the water like distant thunder. The striped shark slashed at the whale's flank, leaving pale gashes in old scars. The whale rolled beneath it and surged upward with terrifying speed, jaws clamping around its rival's body. Blood exploded into the water, a red cloud twisting through the current. The pup hovered at the edge of visibility, its body tense, its instincts screaming. Here was the true law of the ocean. Even the strongest could fall. For a moment it watched, mesmerized by the scale of the conflict. Then, with a flick of its tail, it turned away and slipped back into the shallows. Some lessons were better learned from a distance. Days passed. The Megalodon learned the rhythms of its world. The way krill drifted like snow at dawn. The midday shadows of seabirds diving for fish. The cool surge of deeper water in the evening. It hunted anchovies with greater success now, striking from below where the light blinded them. It discovered that lying motionless among the coral could lure curious prey within range. Slowly, it grew stronger. One morning, a hard slicing vibration entered the nursery. A swordfish, long and lean, its bill cutting the water like a blade. It moved with lethal precision, scattering fish in its path. The Megalodon, still young and inexperienced, turned toward the threat rather than away from it. The first strike came like lightning. The swordfish's bill grazed the pup's flank, leaving a shallow wound that burned in the salt water. The second strike came faster, but the Megalodon rolled away at the last instant, learning the predator's rhythm. On the third charge, the young shark twisted sharply and snapped its jaws shut around the swordfish's body. The speed of the smaller predator was its downfall. Once caught, it could not break free. Warm blood filled the pup's mouth as the fight ended. It rested in the lee of a coral outcrop afterward, the taste of victory still fresh. This was another lesson. Size was not the only path to dominance. Patience and timing could turn a smaller foe into prey. As twilight fell, the Megalodon patrolled the nursery's edge. The water here was darker, the shapes less distinct. From above, a shadow passed, broad, slow, and deliberate. It was not a whale, nor a swordfish, nor any creature the young shark had yet faced. The shadow lingered for a long moment, then drifted away into the open water. The pup could not name it, but something deep in its instincts told it that this was a predator worth remembering. Night in the Miocene Sea was alive with sound. The clicks of shrimp, the faint rumble of shifting sand, the distant song of whales. The young Megalodon swam in slow, looping circles, resting while in motion, its senses tuned to every vibration. Dreams came not as images, but as sensations. The surge of a great hunt, the bite of cold water from the deep, the weightless rush of pursuit. When dawn returned, it brought with it the scent of blood from far beyond the nursery. The Megalodon followed it for a moment before turning back. One day, it would be strong enough to seek out such trails. But for now, it remained where the water was warm and the hunting was easy. It did not know that it was destined to become the largest predator the oceans had ever seen. It did not need to know. The laws of survival were already etched into its body. Hunt, avoid, grow. The rest would come with time, and with it, the making of a legend. The warm shallows that had cradled the young Megalodon for months were beginning to feel smaller. It was not that the ocean itself had shrunk, it never would, but that the shark's body was changing. Its muscles were denser now, its tail thicker and more powerful. Each beat sent it slicing through the water at speeds that startled the fish it once chased in vain. The edges of the nursery, once boundaries defined by instinct, now felt like thin lines waiting to be crossed. One morning, before the sun had climbed high enough to turn the sea into molten gold, a cool current flowed in from the open ocean. It was denser, heavier, carrying scents from far away. The tang of deep-water fish, the musk of kelp forests, the copper thread of blood from a kill made miles offshore. The Megalodon's gills flared, tasting it all. Something ancient and wordless urged it forward. It left the safety of the seagrass plains and followed the current toward the drop. The seafloor sloped down and then fell away entirely, revealing an infinite green-blue void. This was the continental shelf, a ledge into the unknown. For a while, the shark swam parallel to the edge, scanning the water for signs of life. Schools of mackerel flashed by in tight formations. Lanternfish hung in the dim layers below, their bodies pulsing with bioluminescence. From the corner of its vision, the Megalodon saw the shifting silhouette of a giant manta ray gliding above the abyss, its wing-like fins catching faint light. Then came the sound, faint but rhythmic, a series of low pulses that vibrated through the water. It was not the song of a whale. It was sharper, more purposeful. The pulses drew closer until their source emerged from the haze. A small pod of ancient orcas, smaller than their modern descendants, but just as intelligent and coordinated. Their sleek black and white bodies cut through the water with precision, their eyes fixed forward. The Megalodon slowed. It had never encountered orcas before, but instinct whispered caution. These were not solitary hunters like swordfish or even other sharks. They moved with a unity that made them more than the sum of their parts. The orcas passed, ignoring the young giant for now. They were focused on something else. A lone juvenile baleen whale, perhaps separated from its mother. The Megalodon followed at a distance, curious. It watched as the pod spread out, surrounding the whale from all sides. Two orcas lunged at the whale's flanks, driving it upward, while another blocked its escape below. The coordination was flawless, honed by generations of practice. The whale fought back, twisting and striking with its tail, but the outcome was inevitable. The orcas wore it down, delivering shallow but crippling bites until it could no longer swim straight. Then, with a final surge, They forced it into shallower water, where its massive size was a liability. The kill was swift after that. The scent of blood exploded through the water, rich and overwhelming. The Megalodon's muscles tensed. Hunger burned in its belly. The orcas fed first, tearing strips of flesh with swift, jerking motions. When they were sated, they drifted away, leaving behind most of the carcass. The young shark moved in. Its jaws opened wide, rows of serrated teeth glinting in the fractured sunlight. It bit down into the whale's flank, the flesh parting easily under the crushing force. Warmth and oil flooded its mouth, and for the first time, it tasted the fat-rich meat of a large mammal. This was no anchovy or mackerel. This was a meal that could feed it for days. But even here, in the midst of abundance, danger was never far. From the deep, a shadow began to rise, slow at first, then with growing speed. It was another shark, older and larger, perhaps 10 meters long. Its eyes locked on the carcass, and its approach was a silent challenge. The Megalodon turned toward it, holding position. The larger shark circled once, twice, measuring its rival. The young Megalodon held its ground, its pectoral fins angled downward in a display of dominance. It did not fully understand, but felt in its blood. When the older shark lunged, the younger one twisted aside, snapping its jaws into the intruder's gills. Blood clouded the water instantly. The larger shark thrashed, ramming the Megalodon with its head. But the young predator had already released its grip and darted back in, this time clamping onto the base of its rival's tail. One violent shake, and the tendons tore. The older shark, wounded and bleeding, sank slowly into the dark. The Megalodon turned back to the whale carcass. But its hunger was tempered by something new, a sense of ownership, of having defended what was now its. It fed until the sun dipped low, then drifted away from the kill site, belly full and body humming with energy. It did not return to the nursery that night. Instead, it swam into deeper waters, guided by currents and scents only it could read. The open ocean stretched before it, a world of giants, hunters, and endless possibility. It was no longer just a pup. It was becoming a force the Miocene seas would remember. The open ocean was nothing like the nursery. Here, there were no seagrass plains to hide in, no coral labyrinth to break the current. The water stretched in every direction, a blue void that seemed endless. Sunlight reached far but faded quickly, leaving the depths below in perpetual twilight. In this vast space, life moved differently, faster, sharper, more alert. The young Megalodon, now well over 8 meters long, moved with confidence but not arrogance. The lessons of the nursery still pulsed in its instincts: patience, awareness, and the understanding that every shadow might hold teeth. It had been following a warm current for days, riding the invisible highway that carried life across the Miocene seas. Schools of skipjack tuna swam ahead like darting silver blades, scattering when predators approached. Shoals of squid pulsed in perfect synchrony, their skin flickering with color, and here and there, great leviathans, baleen whales, cruised the open waters, their massive bodies shadowing the surface. The scent came first. It was faint at the edge of perception, a metallic ribbon curling through the water. Blood, not the light copper note of a wounded fish, but the heavy oil-rich scent of whale. The Megalodon's muscles tightened in response. This was food worth crossing leagues for. The trail led north, into a region where the water darkened and the light thinned. The shark followed with steady beats of its tail, reading the shifting currents. As the scent grew stronger, another signal joined it, a deep low vibration that trembled through bone. It was the sound of something massive, moving water with each motion. The source came into view slowly. At first, it was only a shadow, a mountain drifting in the blue. Then it resolved into a living shape, a juvenile baleen whale, perhaps 15 meters long, swimming slowly and unevenly. Wounds scored its flanks, and blood streamed from its side in a widening cloud. The Megalodon angled closer, sensing the whale's weakness, but something was wrong. The whale was not alone. A second shadow appeared below, rising from the deep. It moved with the heavy, deliberate grace of something that feared nothing. The shape of its head was unmistakable, massive, rectangular, like the prow of a ship. Its mouth, when it opened, revealed conical teeth built to crush bone. Livyatan, the apex predator of the Miocene seas, ruler of the deep before Megalodon's kind rose to dominance, and it was already feeding. The whale thrashed weakly as the Livyatan surged upward, clamping its jaws around the creature's midsection. Flesh tore in great ribbons, and the water churned with blood and bubbles. The Megalodon's gills flared as it tasted the kill in the water. Hunger urged it forward, but instinct screamed caution. To challenge a Livyatan was to gamble everything. It circled at a distance, watching the massive whale fall into the predator's grip. The Livyatan bit again, tearing another slab of meat free, its small eyes fixed on the kill. But then, just for a moment, those eyes shifted. They locked on the Megalodon. The young shark froze mid-beat. The message was clear and needed no language. This is mine. But hunger is a powerful thing. The Megalodon had been riding empty for 2 days, conserving energy for the right hunt. The whale's body was a feast beyond measure, and if it waited too long, scavengers or the Livyatan itself might strip it clean. It began its approach in slow, deliberate arcs, keeping low, reading the other predator's posture. The Livyatan shifted, releasing the whale's body just enough to face the shark. The two titans now swam parallel, measuring each other, every movement loaded with warning. The Megalodon struck first. It darted forward, aiming not for the whale, but for the Livyatan's flank. Its jaws clamped down just behind the pectoral fin, teeth sawing through blubber and muscle. The Livyatan bellowed, a low-frequency roar that made the water itself vibrate, and twisted violently. The shark was shaken loose, the force sending it tumbling into the blue. The counterattack was immediate. The Livyatan surged forward, jaws wide, and bit down on the Megalodon's tail. Pain exploded through the shark's body, but adrenaline drove it into a savage roll, raking the whale-killer's jaw with its teeth. Blood from both predators mingled now, clouding the water into a crimson haze. They broke apart, circling again. The Megalodon kept its body angled, ready to turn in any direction, while the Livyatan paced with steady, measured strokes. Neither could afford a mistake. A single miscalculation could mean death. The second clash was even more violent. They came together head-on, jaws snapping, water erupting in shockwaves around them. The Megalodon's teeth found the Livyatan's lower jaw, tearing deep. But the whale-killer's conical teeth clamped down on the shark's side, crushing ribs. Both released at once, retreating into a wary stalemate. The wounded whale, forgotten in the frenzy, began to sink, its body drifting slowly into the depths. Both predators turned toward it in unison. For a moment, it seemed they would clash again, but the Livyatan, bleeding heavily from its jaw, gave a slow, rumbling exhale and turned away, sinking back into the deep where it ruled unchallenged. The Megalodon was left alone with the prize. Its body ached from the encounter, but hunger overrode pain. It tore into the whale's flesh in great mouthfuls, each bite sending new waves of warmth and strength through its muscles. The feast lasted hours, the carcass spinning slowly in the current as the shark fed. When it finally drifted away, belly heavy and wounds beginning to clot, the young Megalodon carried more than just food in its body. It carried the knowledge that the open ocean had more than one ruler, and that survival would demand not just strength, but strategy. Far below, in the black, the Livyatan's shape faded into darkness, its wounds glowing faintly in the mind of the shark like a warning. This was not their last meeting. The ocean changed long before the sky gave any sign. Far out on the open blue, the water thickened and cooled, sliding under the sunlit layer like a shadow with intent. It carried scents from a world away, the bitter tang of ice, the musk of kelp forests swaying in unseen currents, and the faint copper ribbon of distant blood. This was the cold route, the ancient migratory highway followed by the great whales for millions of years. The young Megalodon, now well over 10 meters long, had been patrolling open waters for weeks. The wounds from its brutal encounter with the Livyatan in Chapter 3 had healed into pale arcs across its flank. Faint but permanent reminders. It moved with more calculation now, conserving energy until the ocean whispered of opportunity. And now, the cold current was whispering loudly. The deep carried song. Long, resonant calls that rolled through the water in waves you could feel more than hear. Each note was a pulse from the giants of the sea, baleen whales, heavy with fat, traveling in pods that stretched beyond the horizon. Their bodies cast shadows the size of small islands. Calves swam close to their mothers, sheltered by sheer size. Males swam along the flanks, scanning for threats. Every few minutes, a tail would lift and fall, sending pressure ripples for hundreds of meters. The Megalodon stayed deep and parallel to the herd, gliding in the slipstream of their mass. From here, it could feel the rhythm of the migration, the steady strokes, the low social calls, the occasional rush of movement when a whale surfaced to breathe. Then came disruption. A different sound pierced the deep, rapid clicks, sharper and more deliberate than whale song. Shapes emerged in the blue, black and white predators, sleek and precise. Ancient orcas, smaller than the modern kind but just as intelligent, their eyes bright with calculation. They split and reformed like fragments of a single mind, circling the herd in tight maneuvers. The whales responded instantly. Their formation tightened, calves tucked even closer to mothers, and the pitch of their calls dropped into something urgent. The orcas began their harassment, darting close, feinting attacks, then peeling away. It was a game of pressure, designed to create openings. From the edge of the action, the Megalodon watched. It had no alliance here, not with whales, not with orcas. What it needed was weakness, and weakness always appeared when predators clashed. And there it was. A scarred bull, massive but aging, fell half a body length behind the pod. Perhaps it was tired from long travel. Perhaps old wounds slowed its strokes. Either way, it had slipped into the gray zone between the safety of the herd and the reach of the hunters. The Megalodon moved into position, its pectoral fins angling slightly down. A subtle display of intent. It rose from the depths, the bull's massive flank now filling its vision. The first bite was surgical, not into the belly where the blubber was thickest, but at the base of the pectoral fin, where muscle and tendon powered the whale's movements. Teeth met flesh with a force that would have shattered bone in smaller animals. Warmth erupted into the water. The bull convulsed, slamming its fluke in a desperate counterattack. The impact hit the shark's ribs like a battering ram, forcing it to release. But the damage was done. Each stroke of the bull's fin was now uneven, slower. The orca saw it instantly. They swarmed the bull's head and tail, nipping and distracting. The Megalodon drifted outward, letting them spend their energy, while it circled for the next strike. The water was thick with the taste of blood and oil. Then the ocean itself seemed to change pressure. A low, bone, deep vibration rolled through the water, not like the drawn-out song of whales, but like the slow rumble of something massive announcing its presence. The shadow rose from below. It was like watching a piece of the seafloor come alive. A block-shaped head, scars etched deep across its hide, and jaws lined with conical teeth that could crush bone as easily as flesh. Livyatan, the killer of whales, the rival apex of these seas. Its massive body cut through the current without hurry, as if certain nothing would stand in its way. The Megalodon froze mid-beat. Their last encounter had ended without a clear victor, but the memory of pain still lingered in its muscles. This was no scavenger to be driven off. This was a predator that had ruled the ocean long before the Megalodon-esque kind rose to dominance. The Livyatan ignored the orcas entirely. It set its course directly for the wounded bull, accelerating with each beat of its tail. The orcas scattered, unwilling to contest the approach of a creature that could kill them with one strike. The Megalodon stayed in the periphery, watching, calculating. The collision was catastrophic. The Livyatan surged upward under the bull's midsection, jaws opening wide enough to engulf a small boat. It clamped down just forward of the flipper, teeth sinking through blubber into bone. Blood gushed in a torrent, painting the water a deep red. The bull's song turned into a low, gurgling moan as it thrashed. For a moment, the Livyatan's throat and jaw hinge were exposed. The Megalodon moved without conscious thought, an instinct as old as predation itself. It lunged in from below and to the side, aiming for the vulnerable joint. Its serrated teeth sawed through muscle and connective tissue, leaving a jagged wound. The Livyatan roared, a sound felt more than heard, and twisted violently. Its conical teeth found the Megalodon's pectoral fin, crushing down with bone-splintering force. Pain shot through the shark's body. It rolled and tore free, leaving shreds of flesh in the whale-killer's mouth. The water became a vortex of power and rage. The orcas kept their distance, circling like vultures waiting for the end. The bull, half-dead, drifted lower with each heartbeat. The Livyatan turned again, locking eyes with the Megalodon. There was no fear in that gaze, only challenge. For several tense seconds, they circled, two titans measuring not just size, but will. Then, as if by silent agreement, the Livyatan broke off. It descended slowly, disappearing into the cold depths, leaving the prize behind. Whether it was because of the injury to its jaw or simply a calculation of risk, The Megalodon could not know. It moved in, claiming the kill. Its jaws opened wide, tearing deep into the bull's flank. Each bite released waves of warmth and rich oil, feeding muscles and healing wounds. The orcas darted in to steal strips of blubber, but backed off when the shark turned toward them. By the time the sun dipped low, the feast was nearly gone. Only bones and drifting scraps remained, falling into the darkness where other mouths waited. The Megalodon, belly full and body aching, drifted in the fading light. Far below, in the black water beyond sight, the Livyatan swam on. Their paths would cross again, and next time, the ocean might not be big enough for both. The warm season had returned to the Miocene seas. From the equator to the edges of the polar shelves, currents shifted, bringing surges of nutrient-rich water that painted the ocean green with life. Plankton bloomed in great spiraling clouds, feeding krill that swarmed in densities thick enough to turn the water into a living soup. And where there was food for the smallest mouths, the largest mouths followed. For the young Megalodon, now over 12 meters long and heavy with muscle, this was a season without scarcity. It patrolled a domain stretching hundreds of kilometers, a kingdom without borders but defined by abundance. The scars along its flanks and pectoral fin from battles past had faded to pale ridges, a history written into skin. Each one was a lesson, and every lesson had made it faster, sharper, more deliberate. The migration routes were full again. Pods of baleen whales moved through the warm seas in long, slow lines. Calves born in the cold months now traveled with their mothers toward feeding grounds, still smaller than adults but large enough to tempt predators willing to risk a fight. Other pods traveled in loose groups, bulls, solitary and wary, trailing behind the main herds. These stragglers, old or injured, were the easiest targets. The Megalodon knew the patterns. It had learned that patience often brought better kills than reckless charges. When the herds passed through its hunting grounds, it did not rush. Instead, it sank deep, letting the blue water close above, until the surface was only a pale glow. Down here, sound traveled further, and the giant could hear the low moans and pulsed calls of whales kilometers away. Today, the soundscape was full, overlapping songs, the rhythmic thud of flukes, the swish of enormous bodies pushing through water. The Megalodon angled toward the loudest cluster. Its eyes adjusted to the shifting light as it closed in. Through the haze, massive shapes emerged. A group of 6 baleen whales, moving in a staggered line. 2 were calves, each guarded by a mother on one side and a bull on the other. The final whale, a male trailing behind, bore scars from old orca attacks along its flanks. Its strokes were slower than the others, and its exhalations at the surface lasted just a bit too long. The shark sank lower, shadowing the bull from beneath. It had learned to wait for the moment when a whale rose for air, when its body tilted upward and the force of its kick slowed. It came when the bull angled toward the surface, the great head breaking into sunlight in a spray of mist. The Megalodon surged upward from below, jaws gaping. Its first bite struck at the base of the whale's tail, severing tendons that powered its propulsion. The water exploded in white foam and blood. The whale bellowed, a deep, desperate sound that sent ripples through the pod ahead. The mothers turned sharply, calves pressing tight to their sides. The bull twisted, thrashing, but its tail strokes were erratic now, each one weaker than the last. The Megalodon did not rush the second attack. It followed alongside, just out of range of the flukes, watching the giant slow. Each kick carried the bull less distance. Each breath took longer to draw. When the moment came, the shark surged again, this time ramming the whale's flank just behind the pectoral fin. The impact stunned the bull, forcing it onto its side. The Megalodon's teeth closed on the soft tissue behind the jaw, crushing cartilage and slicing through vessels. The end was quick. The massive body went still, except for the slow roll as its buoyancy fought gravity. A cloud of red drifted from the wounds, curling upward in lazy spirals. The Megalodon bit deep into the blubber-rich flank, tearing free slabs of meat heavy with oil. Each mouthful was a surge of energy, enough to power hours of effortless cruising. The feast drew company. First came the scavenger sharks, smaller species with thin, restless movements, darting in to snap at floating scraps. Then, from the deeper shadows, a pair of broad, dark shapes emerged. Orcas, not the ancient black and white hunters from the cold route, but a smaller, coastal variant, quicker and more agile. They circled warily, reading the Megalodon's body language. The giant did not chase them off immediately. It fed until the ache in its belly eased, then turned sharply with a flick of its massive tail. The motion was enough. The orcas fled to a safer distance, content to pick over what remained once the apex had moved on. By late afternoon, only the skeleton remained, stripped of blubber and muscle, sinking slowly toward the abyss. The Megalodon cruised away from the sight, its body heavy but its mind alert. It had learned that a full belly in these waters meant time. Time to patrol, time to heal, and time to prepare for the next hunt. This was the season of the apex, when the warm seas belonged to no one else. But even here, dominance was not absolute. Far to the north, beyond the edge of the warm current, another scent had begun to drift southward. Faint, but familiar. A predator scent tinged with the iron memory of their last clash. The Livyatan was moving again, and the Megalodon knew the warm season would not end before they met once more. The warm season was fading. The ocean's surface still shimmered under the sun, but beneath, the water was changing. The warm, buoyant layers thinned, replaced by heavier, colder water that slid in from the south. With the cold came movement, not just of currents, but of life. The great baleen herds were leaving. From every corner of the warm seas, pods of whales began their long migration toward richer feeding grounds in the polar waters. Calves, now nearly the size of their mothers, swam with more confidence. Bulls returned to their solitary paths, and old scars from the season's predators had begun to fade under new layers of blubber. For the Megalodon, this migration was opportunity. The warm season had been one of abundance, easy kills, constant prey, but it had also been crowded with other hunters. In the open ocean, dominance was never unchallenged. Smaller sharks, orcas, and even scavenging fish had trailed its hunts, cutting into its meals. In the cold, there would be fewer mouths, but the cold also carried risks. The Megalodon had followed the migration routes before, but never this far. It stayed deep, below the shimmering thermocline where warm water sat like a lens over the darker blue below. The whales ahead moved with a slower, steadier rhythm now, conserving energy for the long journey. Above them, the sun's light was dulled, muted by the increasing plankton blooms that painted the water green. It chose a target carefully, a mid-sized bull that had fallen behind its pod, swimming alone in a narrow band of cold current. The shark shadowed it from below, watching for signs of fatigue. Days passed in a slow dance of predator and prey, each night bringing colder water, each dawn thinning the light. Then, the scent came, faint at first, almost lost in the churn of krill and plankton. But it carried with it a signature the Megalodon knew, the sharp, heavy tang of another apex predator. One it had fought before, one it had left wounded, Livyatan. The smell thickened with each league into the cold. It was not the scent of a fresh kill, but of territory, a chemical map left in the water to be read by those who understood. And the message was clear: you are not alone here. The Megalodon's muscles tightened with instinctive caution. The cold seas belonged to the Livyatan. Its hunts here were supported by the terrain, steep drop-offs, canyons that funneled prey into kill zones, and currents that masked its approach. The bull whale ahead breached for air, a slow, heavy motion that sent mist spiraling into the grey sky. The Megalodon began its ascent, jaws parting in anticipation. But just as it closed the gap, the water changed. It felt it in the pressure before it saw it, the surge of displacement, as something massive moved beneath. Then, from the shadow of a canyon wall, it emerged. The Livyatan, its block-shaped head rose from the depths, scars pale against the dark hide. Its eye caught the sharks, and in that moment there was no need for posturing or threat displays. This was not a meeting. This was an ambush. The Livyatan struck first. It came in from below and to the side, jaws opening in a flash of white. The Megalodon twisted, but the whale-killer's conical teeth found its flank, crushing blubber and bruising muscle. The impact drove the shark upward, forcing it toward the surface in a spiral of pain. The Megalodon recovered mid-spin, tail beating hard, and countered. It aimed for the hinge of the Livyatan's jaw, the same weak point it had bitten in their last encounter. But the whale-killer was ready. It rolled into the attack, catching the shark's snout in a sideways bite that rattled bone. They separated, the water between them clouded with blood, both theirs and the whale's. The bull, now panicked, tried to flee, but it was trapped between two apex predators. The Livyatan ignored the Megalodon for the moment and surged at the whale, ramming it broadside to stun it. The Megalodon saw its chance. It dove under the whale's belly, coming up on the opposite flank, and clamped down hard behind the pectoral fin. The whale screamed in low, vibrating tones, twisting in agony. Now the kill was a tug of war. The Livyatan bit at the whale's head. The Megalodon tore at its midsection. The two predators locked eyes over the body, each calculating risk. The cold water slowed the shark's muscles. Here, the Livyatan's endurance was greater. The decision came swiftly. The Megalodon released, letting the Livyatan drag the whale toward the canyon wall. It circled wide, moving into the open water, its tail strokes deliberate but heavy. The fight was not worth finishing. Not here, not in this predator's domain. As it left the canyon behind, the Megalodon carried with it more than fresh wounds. It carried the knowledge that the cold seas were a trap, one it had entered once and might have to enter again. Far behind, the Livyatan's bellow rolled through the depths, a sound of victory and warning both back and ahead. The migration still stretched on, a moving feast the Megalodon would not abandon. The cold deepened until even the sunlight seemed reluctant to travel far. Above, the surface lay under a broken ceiling of ice, slabs drifting apart in the slow chaos of the seasonal melt. Each piece was its own island, some as large as cliffs, others no bigger than a wave crest. Between them, channels of dark water wound through like rivers in a frozen delta. This was the edge of the polar realm, where the migration slowed. Whales came here to feed on the dense blooms of krill that swarmed beneath the ice, their massive jaws sweeping up mouthful after mouthful of the tiny crustaceans. For predators, it was a place of ambush and opportunity. Narrow passages, limited escape routes, and prey slowed by the cold. The Megalodon had followed the herd this far north for the first time. Its body, built for warmer waters, was heavier now, muscles tightening in the chill, but hunger drove it on. The fat stores from the warm season were nearly burned away. A single kill here could restore its strength for weeks. From below, it watched the shapes of the whales through the fractured ice, their silhouettes warping as light bent around them. The soundscape was strange. The low moans of the whales mingled with the groan and crack of shifting ice, each fracture echoing through the water like distant thunder. Then came the other sound, short, sharp bursts, clicks fired in rapid succession. The Megalodon stilled instantly. It had heard that language before, AUKUS, and not just one or two. The overlapping patterns told of a pod, perhaps 8 or 9 strong. The clicks grew louder, and then the hunters appeared, weaving through the ice channels with uncanny coordination. These were not the coastal AUKUS from the warm season. These were polar AUKUS, built for endurance in the cold. Their bodies thicker, their movements deliberate. They fanned out around the edge of the whale pod, each one taking a position like pieces on a board. The Megalodon's instincts tightened. This was a trap in the making, and not for it. The AUKUS were driving the whales toward something. The answer came from the deep. A shadow, vast and deliberate, rose from below the ice shelf's edge. Its head was as blocky and massive as ever, its scars pale against the dark hide. Livyatan, the whale killer, moved with deceptive slowness, its path cutting directly into the route the whales were being herded along. The AUKUS were working with it. Whether by instinct or learned coordination, the effect was the same. Together, they could isolate a single whale, disable it, and keep other predators away until the kill was finished. The Megalodon had seen the Livyatan's ambushes before, but never paired with other hunters. This was something new and dangerous. The whales began to panic. Their formation broke apart as the AUKUS darted in, ramming and biting at fins to turn individuals away from the safety of the group. One young adult bull, separated from its companions, was driven toward the shadow of the Livyatan. The Megalodon moved. It rose from the deep flank, using the confusion as cover. The bull whale's distress calls vibrated through its ribs, a beacon in the dark water. The Livyatan was closing in from the opposite side, its massive jaws beginning to open. The shark struck first. It hit the whale low, behind the pectoral fin, the bite deep enough to open a curtain of blood in the water. The whale twisted violently, buying itself seconds of freedom as it kicked away from both predators. The AUKUS reacted instantly, broke formation to harry the Megalodon, darting in with shallow, stinging bites at its flanks before peeling away. Their speed in the cold water was an advantage the shark couldn't match for long. Each pass was meant to distract, to keep it from focusing on the whale. The Livyatan saw its moment. It surged forward, not at the whale, but at the Megalodon. The shark turned in time to avoid a full bite, but the impact was still crushing, knocking the breath from its gills and driving it toward an ice channel too narrow for its bulk. The ice above fractured from the force, sending a cascade of white shards drifting down. The Megalodon twisted away, scraping along the edge of the ice, but the movement had cost it position. The whale was back in the kill lane, and the Livyatan took it. With a bone-deep bellow, it clamped down on the bull's head, teeth sinking past blubber into bone. The whale's thrashing slowed, then stopped. The orcas swarmed in immediately, latching onto the carcass, stripping blubber in coordinated strips. The Megalodon circled at the edge of the frenzy. Hunger screamed for it to charge, to fight for its share, but instinct held it back. 8 orcas and a Livyatan together were not just a wall of muscle. They were a machine built for killing and keeping. It waited, pacing the perimeter like a shadow in the dark, until the feeding slowed. The orcas began to peel away, bellies rounded, their job done. The Livyatan took its fill, then released the remains, letting the stripped skeleton drift into the deep. Only then did the Megalodon move in, taking the scraps left behind. The meat was enough to take the edge off its hunger, but not enough to satisfy it. Still, it had learned something more valuable than a full belly. The cold realm was no longer the Livyatan-esque domain alone. There was a new alliance here, one that could rewrite the balance of power in the Miocene seas. As it swam away from the ice channels, the Megalodon carried with it a new kind of awareness. This was not just a war for food, it was becoming a war for control, and sooner or later, it would have to break that alliance, or be broken by it. The ice edge was never silent. Even on still days, the sound of the polar realm carried deep. The groan and crack of shifting shelves, the muted percussion of waves, colliding beneath the frozen ceiling, and the constant living chorus of whales, fish, and the predators that hunted them. But under the ice, silence of another kind ruled, the silence of absolute control. The control belonged to 2 killers, the orcas, quick and coordinated, driving whales into positions where escape was impossible. The Livyatan, a living siege weapon, emerging from the depths to crush prey in a single bite. Together, they were not 2 predators, they were one system, a machine. Megalodon had watched them work before. It knew how precise they were, how each moved with the other as if choreographed by the sea itself. But the shark was not here to watch, not this time. It was here to break them. The chosen ground Megalodon had been in the cold too long. Hunger had trimmed it down to raw efficiency. No wasted bulk, no sluggish fat, only muscle coiled like steel cables under scarred skin. Each sweep of its massive tail was measured, every movement conserving the energy that remained. It had found a place that could serve as a trap within a trap, the mouth of a submarine canyon. A cold current poured out from the depths here, curling into the warmer surface water. The canyon walls rose sheer on either side, and the ice above was fractured, ready to drop shards into the water at the slightest disturbance. Most important was the eddy, a pocket of slowed, swirling water at the canyon mouth. Anything fast entering that space would lose speed for a heartbeat. A heartbeat was enough. The bait appears it didn't take long. A trio of baleen whales drifted into view, 2 large cows and a subadult yearling, heavy-bodied and slow-moving, their bellies full from weeks of feeding on krill. They were not weak, but they were exactly the kind of group the machine loved to take apart. Megalodon did not attack. It rose toward the surface, letting its shadow spill over them, then passed across their path, releasing the oily chemical trace of a predator into the water. The cows tightened formation instantly. The yearling pressed between them, their flukes lashing harder. It was the reaction the shark wanted. It was also the signal the orcas were waiting for. The machine moves, the clicks arrived first. Short, rapid bursts, precise, overlapping, the language of coordination. The orcas came into view moments later, polar giants, bulkier than their warm water kin, their black and white hides stark against the ice-filtered blue. They fanned out expertly, a lead pair moving in on the whales, others sweeping the canyon edges, ensuring no route of escape. And then came the shadow from below. It rose with the slow inevitability of a breaking storm. Its head was a block of scarred flesh and bone, its body moving with the calm assurance of a predator that had never lost its place. The orcas were its outriders, the whales its target. The machine was in position. Unpicking the gears, Megalodon didn't strike the whales. It struck the orcas. It surged along the outer edge of their net, cutting across their sonar with the huge, solid signature of its mass. 3 of the hunters peeled away from the formation instantly, drawn by the need to intercept a threat that could ruin the hunt. The shark led them straight toward the canyon mouth. The first orca hit the eddy and faltered, its momentum bleeding away in the strange drag. Megalodon turned on it instantly, clamping down on its flank, not fatally, but deep enough to spill blood into the current. The wounded orca pulled back, leaving to still in pursuit. The first strike on the tyrant, the Livyatan, was closing on the yearling now, jaws yawning wide. Megalodon shot upward from below, not at the whale, but at the throat seam just ahead of the jaw hinge, the vulnerable point that allowed Livyatan's massive mouth to open. The bite landed with brutal precision. Serrated teeth tore into muscle and soft tissue. Livyatan roared, a low, deep vibration that shook the water. Its jaws snapped shut unevenly, leaking water. The yearling veered away toward the safety of its mothers, but the counterattack was immediate. Livyatan swung its head like a battering ram, its teeth raking deep grooves into Megalodon's flank. Pain lit the shark's nerves like lightning, but the goal was achieved. The kill had been interrupted. Cutting the last lines, the orcas realized their prize was escaping. One of the 2 pursuing Megalodon tried to rejoin the main formation, but the eddy caught it, forcing it to slow. The last orca stayed on the shark's tail, darting in with quick nips. Megalodon spun, clamping down on its dorsal ridge. The bite wasn't to kill, it was to remove it from the fight. The orca's scream reverberated through the canyon. It fled, trailing a line of blood. The machine's net was gone. The whales were moving away. The Livyatan stood alone, duel in the shadows without allies or distraction. The Livyatan turned its full attention on the Megalodon. It charged, the water parting before its mass. The shark hugged the canyon wall, forcing the whale killer to pass through the eddy, bleeding at speed. They collided in a whirl of jaws and muscle, the water churning white around them. Megalodon gave ground deliberately, drawing Livyatan deeper into the turbulent water. Then it rolled inside the turn and struck at the jaw hinge again, this time holding on, thrashing its massive head side to side, tearing muscle and tendon. Livyatan bellowed, blood streaming from the wound, its jaws closing with visible difficulty. An ending without death. The Livyatan did not die that day, but it lost the hunt, and it left the battlefield with a wound that would follow it for life. Its jaws no longer sealed cleanly. Every bite would now come with pain. Megalodon too was bloodied, its flank gouged, muscle torn, but it had done what no other predator had, broken the machine. As Livyatan's silhouette slipped back into the depths, the shark turned toward warmer water, its body aching but its resolve unshaken. The next meeting would not be to disrupt a hunt, it would be to end the rival once and for all. The line between the warm season and the cold season was invisible, yet every creature in the ocean could feel it. The currents shifted here, blending greenlit warmth with cobalt depths. Migrating whales streamed along this border, their calls carrying 4 kilometers, rolling like distant thunder under the water. For Megalodon, this place was more than a feeding ground. It was the arena. Months had passed since the canyon battle, months spent in warmer waters, hunting, regaining weight, and letting old wounds harden into pale, raised scars. Its body was now a masterpiece of raw power, shoulders thick as reef walls, a tail that could drive it forward like a torpedo, jaws sharpened by 100 kills. But there was one hunt left unfinished, one rival left unbroken, and the scent of that rival was in the water now. The call of the rival, the current carried it, a ribbon of mammal oil and blood, rich and heavy, marking the kill of something vast. But layered over that was a chemical signature Megalodon could never mistake. Livyatan. There were no canyons here, no fractured ice overhead, no orcas weaving a net, just open ocean, equal ground, honest ground. Megalodon didn't slow. It angled into the scent and began a steady, deliberate approach. Tail beats slow enough to conserve energy, but strong enough to send a shiver of warning down the current. This was not stealth, this was announcement. The first sight, the shadow emerged from the haze like an island lifting from the seafloor. Livyatan's blocky head pushed the water aside, its eyes locked forward, its scars, some old, some given by the shark, now closing in, pale against dark hide. Its flukes moved in slow, confident arcs, wasting nothing. They closed the distance without breaking eye contact. No sudden feints, no unnecessary speed. Both understood what the other was, not prey, not nuisance, but a mirror in which they saw themselves. When they were close enough to feel the pressure of the other's movement, they began to circle. Wide arcs at first, then tighter, reading posture, speed, angles of approach. There would be no retreat. Opening strike, Megalodon broke the pattern. It surged upward from a low angle, jaws yawning wide, aiming for the vulnerable muscle just behind Livyatan's pectoral fin, the seam where motion met power. The bite landed, serrated teeth carved deep, but before the shark could grind in, Livyatan twisted, slamming the crown of its head into the shark's gill slit. The impact was a crushing, bone-deep thud that rattled Megalodon's senses. They broke apart, the water between them clouded red. Both were marked now. Both had felt the other's weight. The war titans, Livyatan lunged low, aiming for Megalodon's tail, the crippling move that could end the fight. The shark pivoted into the attack, sacrificing a slice of flesh to keep its speed, and countered with a brutal rake across the whale-killer's jawline. The wound opened like a red smile, spilling blood in slow ribbons. Roaring through the water, Livyatan surged in again, clamping down on Megalodon's right pectoral. Conical teeth punched into cartilage and muscle. Pain lit the shark's nerves like lightning. Megalodon thrashed, twisting in an explosion of bubbles until the grip tore free, leaving a chunk of its own flesh in Livyatan's mouth. The water was no longer just blue. It was a battlefield of drifting red veils. The descent, without warning, Livyatan dove. Megalodon followed, their bodies spiraling downward into the darkening green. The temperature dropped with every meter. This was Livyatan's home ground, the cold deep where its lungs and muscle endurance gave it an edge. But Megalodon had learned. It let the descent build speed, then shot upward under Livyatan's belly, jaws clamping and tearing a jagged trench through blubber and muscle. A plume of blood rolled downward like smoke in still air. Livyatan recoiled, then rammed the shark's midsection with its head, driving the breath from Megalodon's gills in a burst of silver bubbles. Shifting tactics, they rose again, both slower now, the fight grinding into attrition. Megalodon stopped hunting for single massive strikes. Instead, it attacked in short, savage bursts, targeting the jaw hinge, the weakness it had exploited before. Each bite tore more muscle, making it harder for Livyatan to close its mouth with full power. Livyatan's counterstrikes were still deadly, but the delay in its bite was growing. A fraction of a second. But in this fight, fractions mattered. The final gambit, the whale killer knew it had to end this. It launched in a straight-line charge, aiming to clamp down on the shark's head and crush its skull. Megalodon didn't evade. It dropped half a body length in the last instant, rolled upward from beneath, and locked its jaws across both throat and hinge in a diagonal bite. The effect was instant. Livyatan's body convulsed, tail lashing with the force of a storm, the water boiling into foam. Megalodon held, twisting, tearing, grinding through cartilage and tendon, until closing that jaw became agony. The thrashing slowed, the tail beats lost their rhythm. Finally, the massive body went slack. Aftermath, Megalodon released its grip and circled, scanning for any twitch of life. There was none. Livyatan drifted, sinking into the green-black below, trailing a fading curtain of blood. The sea was suddenly empty of challenge. No rival shadow, no clicks of orcas signaling a hunt. The machine was gone. Megalodon swam above the carcass for a long moment, not feeding only, feeling the weight of the water and the weight of the moment. For the first time, the Miocene seas had one ruler. The ocean carries news in silence. No voices announce change. No banners mark the passing of an age. But every creature feels it. In the weeks after the final battle, the Miocene seas shifted in subtle, undeniable ways. The shadow of Livyatan no longer moved beneath the whales. The machine of death, orcas driving, Livyatan killing, was dismantled, and in its place was only one apex. The whale rode without fear. The whales still sang their long, low calls across the open blue, but the tone of those songs had changed. They no longer bunched together at every shadow. Calves stayed closer to mothers, but not in blind panic. The great bulls no longer spun at every flicker below, ready to defend against the block-headed killer. There was still danger. Megalodon was here. But it was a single danger, predictable, understandable. The whales could adjust to that. A new range for Megalodon. The sea had never been so open. It no longer had to choose its hunting lanes to avoid crossing paths with its rival. The entire migration route lay under its patrol. From the warm shallows where calves were born, to the deep cold where the largest bulls fattened, it moved like a tide with teeth. its hunts were efficient. It struck when the odds were certain, taking the slowest, the largest, the most vulnerable. Each kill fed not just the shark, but the scavenger fleet that always followed. Smaller sharks, fish, even seabirds when scraps reached the surface. The deep without a challenger, the cold deep, once Livyatan's fortress, was now just another hunting ground. Megalodon dove into the green twilight without hesitation, tracking pods into the depths where light faded to nothing. It struck with brutal speed, then rose before the cold could sap too much of its strength. It cruised the mouths of submarine canyons where battles had once been fought. Now, those canyons were quiet, the only echoes the thrum of its own passing. The message written in water the ocean writes, in scent and sound. Megalodon's chemical signature became a living warning, spreading on currents for kilometers. Whales altered their courses at the first trace. Orcas changed their hunting grounds entirely, keeping to shallower waters and smaller prey. Even the deep had learned the new rule. Where this scent lay heavy, there was no room for competition. The weight of solitude dominance came with a strange kind of discipline. The shark could not overhunt without starving itself in the future. Whether by instinct or ancient, inherited memory, it kept a rhythm, hunting, feeding, resting, then moving on, letting the whale herds replenish before circling back. It wasn't mercy, it was efficiency. But the effect was the same. The balance of the Miocene seas was now kept by a single set of jaws. Surface signs sometimes. On calm days Megalodon surfaced fully. Its dorsal fin sliced a long black line across the glittering blue, visible for hundreds of meters. Seabirds gathered overhead, riding the warm drafts, watching for scraps. From above, it was just a shadow in sunlight. From below, it was inevitability given shape. Every creature that saw that fin knew the truth. The deep had a ruler, and it was here. Epilogue. The Miocene seas would not stay the same forever. Currents would shift, ice would come and go. New predators would rise in time. But for now, and for an age in the language of the ocean, there was no doubt. When the sea counted its apex predators, it used only one name, Megalodon, the breaker of the machine, the hunter without rival, the undisputed ruler of the deep.